Hello, guys and gals. Me, Mudahar, and actually, we've got a pretty important thing to me to talk about today. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's a very important thing that's been going on. The no disc, no buy. Now, I actually missed responding to like a message sent to me over here because I was a little bit busy. But basically, it had me. Basically, I was asked to participate in this boycott of Sony, right? And it's one of those things where it kind of shocks me a little bit because I thought for the last month I made plenty of content and enough of a statement to basically show that I don't have any interest going further with like game companies that are against preserving video games, right? Now, before we continue into this video, I think the best way to kind of leverage and sort of talk about this is kind of bring you up with my past. I immigrated to this country when I was a very, very young kid. And the first gaming console that I remember getting, right, was all the way back on one of my birthdays when we were living in an East Toronto apartment. My dad had brought home a PlayStation 1 box, like the original gray box PS1. And, back when I was younger, my dad would be that kind of a dad that, he would come home and when he would buy us a video game here and there, my dad would go to like a pharmacy and purchase the most random video games you could probably ever imagine. For a lot of kids, when they were growing up, Mario Kart was their game. Like if you were a Nintendo household, but us being a PlayStation household, my dad brought home Scars. It was this game where you would have these animals digitized into like these vehicles that you were driving in these digital. It was actually a pretty interesting game, right? Like if I ever have to tell you about Mario Kart, but Ubisoft made it with animals and like a 3D simulation, that would be the game, okay? When a lot of people were playing like their favorite alien, resistance simulator, I was playing something like C12 Final Resistance, okay? One of my like favorite little PlayStation 1 games, super cinematic, super interesting, actually stands up quite well for being a PlayStation 1 game, right? Literally, every time I play this game, I think to myself, full voice acting, full 3D environments, reminiscent of something like Metal Gear Solid, and I'm actually, playing, it's a full campaign, start, middle, and end. And then there were other games like Akuji the Heartless, okay? A lot of other people would be playing, their Banjo-Kazooie. My cousin would have Banjo-Kazooie literally on N64. He was the Nintendo household. And I was the one that had Akuji. And I remember back then, it was kind of impressive because my dad brought home this game that also had 2 extra demos on it. Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, and Tomb Raider. So it also felt like, my dad bought 3 games for us instead of just the one. There were also games like Small Soldiers, for instance, right? Which was, it was a movie tie-in game, but if you played the game and then you watched the movie, which I did later on, you'd be like, whoa, totally different. I mean, the game is super ominous. The game almost feels like a horror game, especially when you're a young kid playing something. And then, of course, games like Siphon Filter and obviously Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy VII, games that I also grew up with. But again, the games that I just talked about are actually very key memories to me, right? They're memories of simpler times when I was much younger. And obviously, my dad would bring home the game. Back in the day, there wasn't really the freedom to go out and buy whatever you wanted. You were kind of just lucky enough to get something on a birthday. Maybe your parents took you to a Blockbuster, like a Rogers store, and you rented a game for a weekend or a week or whatever. And that was pretty much how you played a lot of games, So for me, my dad would be that guy that would unironically pick up the rare games like Tomba 2, bring that shit home, and, he was like, oh, it looks like Mario, it looks close to Mario. I mean, it wasn't Mario, it wasn't a standard platformer, but we were thankful, right? And that's how I got to play a lot of those weird games out there, And when I was recording creepypastas, the best part about it wasn't even reading the creepypasta, it was the ability to just record a random game as background footage, because then I could kind of show people the random side of video games, the most underrated side of video games through my channel. But anyways, as a gamer, as somebody that enjoys video games, importantly enough to me is physical media. This is a Chrono Cross on the original PlayStation, and as you can see right over here, games back in the day used to be these like multi-disc part affairs where again, you would finish disc 1, move all the way to disc 2, and on the ride home, you would get these instruction manuals that would like kind of tell you about the lore and like it would literally be an extra, right? Physical copies, man. I love them. And ultimately, at the end of the day, for a while, I used to take the physical copies that I had and I would just put them into a CD burner, DVD burner, and like back them up, put them into a hard drive, and be able to play them at any given time later on in my life, okay? As I do with emulators all the time. So anyways, to kind of bring you back into it, there's this PlayStation blackout that's supposed to happen in August, and unfortunately the timing we'll get into. For several years now, Sony has continued to grow further apart from its fan base, whether it's closing down beloved studios like Bluepoint, pursuing a misguided live service strategy, which Sony continues to lose billions of dollars on this shit. I don't know why they're constantly making marathons and Concords when they don't have the money raised from them to justify that spending. I don't know what Sony's about, okay? Maybe they think they're gonna strike it big and have like Grand Theft Auto Online or something like that. You know, something that prints like billions of dollars. Maybe they'll have multiple multi-billion-dollar generating live service games, but we've yet to see them materialize. Sony is so inept that a game like Destiny 2, which is already end of life, has seen a resurgence of players, and they're not even focused on announcing a Destiny 3 or focusing on that. In fact, I don't even think the company they own, Bungie, is at this point the same company to even be pursuing that. But anyways, ending physical discs in 2028 feels like the last straw, and honestly, it is for me. And I'll get to why. We understand there's only so much the company can control, but with decisions that are within its control, the company continues to mismanage the strong position it inherited from the PS4 era. There are so many issues with PlayStation right now that bringing back physical games would only be meeting halfway. There's so much more that the company can do. We miss Twisted Metal, SOCOM, Sly Cooper, Resistance. You know, the issue with this paragraph alone is I understand physical games are important. The other reality is Sony is also a business. How many people would exist to be buying a Sly Cooper game or even a SOCOM game? I know that I would buy those two franchises, right? I'd buy a Twisted Metal game. But ultimately, Sony looks at the numbers of something being sold, right? If something isn't being sold, you're probably not going to go and produce it or make it, right? Obviously, if they made every single one of their IPs again, would I love a new Siphon Filter game? Sure. But I'm only one person spending the $60, right? Obviously, if it's not going to sell, if it's not going to be worth the cost of production, it's about the same thing as Sony making the other live service craps out there, right? But I do understand, right? Sony has a lot of these IPs, and it's kind of infuriating to see them spend so much money on a shitty game like Concord when the same budget they spent there could have been used to make a small-scale Twisted Metal game that people could spend $40 on and play on PlayStation 5. It would have been great if they could build another SOCOM game that would, you know, leverage into the modern tactical shooter like, you know, craze that's going on, maybe even the extraction shooter craze. I hate to say a SOCOM extraction shooter is something I'd be more interested with than a fucking Concord. Sly Cooper would be great, you know, small scale, low budget, but hopefully enough people buy it. Like, that's the issue, right? So basically, in this case, they're calling a economic and gameplay blackout from August 23rd to August 30th. So there's a couple issues that I have with this. First off, this is in between Modern Warfare 4 open beta. And if it's one thing that kills your boycott, it's Gun and Ball Gamer, right? Back in the day, there was a Modern Warfare 2 boycott, okay? Literally, I have a post from the StarCraft forums where they talk about this, right? Where literally MW2 would say that they'd have like no dedication. Basically, MW2 when it dropped on PC was like basically one of the worst multiplayer experiences for PC. Like no server browsers, none of that bullshit. It would be basically the worst aspects of consoles legitimized and brought to the PC. So obviously the community wasn't a fan of it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when it came down to it, people were still playing the fucking game. Even when it came to MW3, what's funny is this screenshot they share around, but it basically is the case, right? Like, here's the MW2 boycott. Guys, we're still playing MW2 here, okay? Like, it is what it is. Gun and Ball Gamer is the kind of gamer that will absolutely screw over any blackout. And the thing about it is ultimately, at the end of the day, the way you participate is by turning off your console and logging out for 7 days. Now look, I think it's honorable to have like a boycott, like make your voice heard. But when you give an end date to a boycott, effectively all that tells Sony is, don't worry guys, we're going to see low player counts on August 23rd, and we'll be back to normal by a week down the road. Now here's the thing, okay? Sony does not give a fuck if you sign off for 7 days and come back. Sony gives a fuck if you stop giving them more money, okay? So for me, then now that this has been done for a month, I want to tell you what I've done differently in my time. Okay, since Sony dropped this terrible fucking news that they were basically killing the physical discs, that was the only reason for me to own this kind of stuff, I have basically moved my gaming over to Steam. And they might be like, oh, well, you're switching digital over to some other other service. Isn't that the same thing? Not really. Being on PC, yes, I'm part of the digital problem, right? Ultimately, I'm buying a digital game on Steam. I'm buying a license. But here's the thing with something like Steam, for instance, right? I just bought the Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake, right? So for instance, right here, you can see that Black Flag Resynced is located on my device. I've been playing it. And the reality of it is that you might be like, well, what happens if Steam takes this game away from you? And that could happen, actually. But here's the thing about Black Flag Resynced. This game has also been bypassed with its DRM. So I'm not promoting piracy over here. I'm not going to sit here and say that. But the reason I'm talking about this is even me purchasing a game for like 70 bucks, if down the road Ubisoft censors this game, removes this game, Steam removes this game, having the files available on PC is better than having no file available whatsoever. The problem with getting rid of physical content on these consoles is at the end of the day, Sony can dictate exactly what you do and not do on your system. And it's the same for Nintendo, it's the same for Xbox. What I have decided to basically do instead of boycotting Sony is just move my economic options over. I'm not going to stop playing video games. I love video games. I really enjoy them. You know what game I'm really fucking excited for at the end of this year? Grand Theft Auto 6. You know what pains me? Is the game is not coming out on PC day one, which means if I'm going to play that game in general with my friends, I'd have to wait for the actual PC version, whether it drops on Rockstar's launcher or Steam or whatever. I have to wait for that game on that system. But it's not as if GTA 6 is not going to drop on those systems. The fact that we're going entirely digital shows me one key problem, right? In the last few weeks, we've already had issues where Xboxes, because of an online service, couldn't even launch downloaded games. Heck, even disc games were apparently fucked in the process. We've seen situations where Sony actually faced server outages. So if this is the future that Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, heck, all these platforms want to give us, it's situations like that where the servers go down that make people think, oh, well, what happens if I wanted to play a game that day? What happens if I wanted to download a game from my digital library that day, but the servers are gone? You might be like, well, you can just wait for later, but what if that was my only free time, right? Like, what happens if I want to play something like fucking Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I bought it digitally, but the servers are down, so it's a single-player game, but in order to access it, I have to go onto the internet and download it, as opposed to, hey, here's my disc copy of the game. All I have to do is install the data disc, then the play disc offline, and just play it right there and then. That is the issue. That's the fucking problem. So when GTA 6 ends up dropping, I actually theorize, because the game is so popular, that when the game is allowed to be preloaded like a week before release, I expect Sony servers to crash and burn. I expected Microsoft servers to crash too. But I expected way worse for Sony. PlayStation Network has a very poor track record of fucking consistency, okay? And ultimately down the road, I can't wait to see when the servers start crashing and the people who are the biggest defenders of this digital future and the people that are the most apathetic realize, oh wow, I just bought the single player game. Oh my god, I'm having troubles downloading it. I can imagine the shitstorm that will happen on the launch of something like GTA 6, one of the most anticipated and hyped games on PlayStation, where literally the week up to its release, so many people are going to be attempting to download this game. And again, it's going to be so many people, so many. I'm sure GTA 6 has literally sold like $1 billion worth of pre-orders already. And a vast majority of them probably on PlayStation. And ultimately, downloading that game is going to absolutely hammer those servers. And I think both Rockstar Games and Sony will regret not having physical copies for the game, where at least, even if the servers are crashing, you can still take those discs, install them, and play a single-player crime game, right? I think the only way to make this known to Sony is you got to cancel your PlayStation Plus subscriptions, which I've canceled mine. I don't have it. I don't feel the need to give Sony any money monthly for an online service that let's be honest, I barely use to begin with, right? And I'm not spending extra money to play PlayStation classics, like PlayStation 2 games. Dog, I know how to fucking set up an emulator, okay? The fact that I would give you monthly for it is just a sign of me being incredibly lazy in that regard. I'm not going to sit there and buy games like Assassin's Creed on Sony servers. You know why? Because Sony learns the message when people stop buying games from their systems and start purchasing them on places like Steam or even Xbox or Nintendo or whatever. They realize once people start doing this, when you're not making that cut of a digital sale, because this game is multi-platform and you can just buy it on PC, that is when that company truly learns. I 100% support the PlayStation boycott. You know who I probably think supports it even more than me is probably fucking Chad Warden, okay? Chad Warden would not be okay with the current state of PlayStation dog shit that we're seeing right now. But a weak boycott isn't going to do anything. All it's going to do is the bean counters at Sony will realize when their player base comes back. The only way to make this known is going into the future, instead of purchasing their games on the Sony platform, you purchase games, even mostly multi-platforms, because that's really where most of the gaming is these days. Again, I'm a little biased because I really don't care about shit like Wolverine. I think the last Sony game that I enjoyed, not released that long ago, Death Stranding 2, already on PC anyways. So for me, looking into the future, if I'm going to be purchasing games like GTA 6, dog, I might as well just pick that up on the fucking PC. Honestly, it's probably better for me to pick that up on like platforms like Xbox, because at least even Xbox, in my opinion, might be a little bit more better than like the Sony platform, simply because of how much more reliant Microsoft is. And honestly, the fact that when you buy at least they're exclusives digitally, they give you like an Xbox version of the game alongside, you know, the PC version of the game down the road. So I don't know. Sony, for me, the path that they've went down with this live service shit, these disc things, I'm not somebody that's looking at this blackout as something that's going to change their mind. What really is going to change their mind is you start buying all these digital games on different competing storefronts. And ultimately, once they see that reflected in their balance sheets, maybe they turn it around. Like, they said they're not going to release discs till 2028. I'm not even going to buy the physical copy for FF7 Revelations. I was planning to for PlayStation 5. But honestly, them saying that 2028, it doesn't matter. 2020, the beginning of this month was sort of the last day. I don't care about, you know, 2026, 2027, 2028, because for me, knowing their plans going into the future, I know that the money that I spent on physical copies for PlayStation is fucking useless, because the PS6, anything going forward, won't even have a disc, won't even have anything to begin with. It's all locking you down into that digital ecosystem. And there's no reason for me to stick with a closed ecosystem like Sony when I could just stick with something like Steam or GOG or even Epic. Just stay on the PC platform. You know, not only is the experience better, not only am I able to play all of my backwards compatible games and the memories that I told you about in the beginning, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't have to be involved with Sony financially. And I think that is really what's going to change things. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.